today we're going to walk through converting data types to a different data types. Specifically, we're going to go through converting strings, integers, and lists. And we're also going to see use cases and why we can or you should want to convert these data types to each other. So to begin with, there are, of course, three different functions that we're going to focus on. So those functions are strings, integers, and lists. Each of which we're going to try to focus and see the best use cases for converting to these data types. Let's begin with the first one, converting strings to ints. Now, why would you want to convert a string to an integer, you say? So let's say you have a variable called apple, and that apple has the amount of apples you have, which is 10. And let's say you have another variable called oranges, and oranges also have the amount of oranges that you have. Now let's say you want to find the total of fruits you have. So you try to add your apples plus your oranges to try to get the amount of apples we have together. Now let's see what happens when we try to print fruits to see how much apples we have together. So let's see what happens. You get 105. Now does apple plus oranges, 10 plus 5 equals 105? No, it should equal 15. But what's happening is that when you add two strings together, what you're actually doing is just appending them to each other, concatenating them to each other. So it becomes 1, 0, and 5. Instead, what you want to do is actually add the integer value to each other. So how are we going to do this? We're just going to simply use our function int here on both of our variables, on our fruit variables, to then make this both into integers. Now we would have 10 plus 5, which is equal to 15. Now that should give us 15 to see how much fruits we have. Let's see if it works. And yes, we now have 15 apples, so now we know how much apples we have. Great. Next, we're going to move on to converting integers to strings. Now, what is the purpose why you would want to convert an integer to a string? Well, let's say you have a variable called age, and age contains how old you are. So let's say you are 23 years old. Okay? Now let's say you wanted to print out how old you are. So you are gonna create a string text, you are, and then plus age plus years old. So you want this to say I am, you are 23 years old. Now let's see what happens when we try to print age as 23. Oops, we want this to be an integer, so let's make this an integer and let's see what happens. Oh, you get an error saying can only concatenate string, not integer, to string. So this means that when using the plus operator within your print statement, you can't concatenate a string with an integer. So simply what you have to do is use our function string here to make this a string. And now you can concatenate both variable strings and the age variable to get your sentence of you are now 23 years old. Great. Next, we're going to see why we would want to convert a string to a list. Now let's say we have a variable named names, and names contain a set of names. Let's say Bob, Anna, and let's say George. And let's say we wanted to say hi to Bob only. How would we do this? Let's do our print statement, and then we're gonna say hi, and then we're gonna try to say names, and then we're gonna see what happens. Remember, we only want to say hi to Bob. How would we do this? So let's see what happens when we print this. We get hi Bob, Anna, George. Now, how can we possibly say hi to just Bob? We can do hi Bob. We can try indexing to 0 and see if this works. We only get B. So how do we get OB? Well, first, one thing you could do is you can do slicing, where you could do 0, colon, and then 2, 3 actually, because when you slice, the 3 does not count, so you get 2, so you get hi Bob, which is good. That's what we wanted. But what if we don't want to do slicing every time? So what would we do? Well, you can convert your string integer, the string variable, into a list. Now, how do we do this? So we're gonna create a variable called list names, and then we are going to use the list function. So it's list, and then we're gonna put names in here. But in order for us to split them up, we have to, in separate indexes, we have to use the dot split method. This will split each up into its own index, and now we would have each name with its own index. So here is what we're going to do. So now we're going to use our new list variable into names, and then we're going to, so now Bob will be in our 0th index. So let's go 0, and then we're going to print it. And now we have hi Bob again. Now if you want to say hi to Anna, we can just simply do a 1, hi Anna. And if you want to say hi to George, we could just do hi George, which is 2, sorry. And there you go. So now we could say hi to either names within the names variable simply by doing one indexing instead of splicing. And it gets more tricky the higher up you go, because then you would have to count how many characters are before George and less. So this is a much simpler way to do it. Lastly, we're going to convert a list to a string. Now, for what reason we want to do this? So let's say, once again, we have our name, which is equal to Bob, but we have Bob as a list, with each character being its own index. Now, when we would print hi Bob, let's try to print hi Bob here and see what we get. We get an error saying can only concatenate strings and not list to string. Great, we can simply fix this. I think most people are thinking by putting in the string variable here to change the string to a list. So let's see, to change the list to a string, sorry. So let's see what happens when we do this. We're missing one. We get hi B-O-B. Now we still don't want this. This is not what we want. We just want to see hi Bob. Why do we get all this other syntaxes? So to do this, what we need to do to get rid of all these other syntaxes, we actually need to create a new string or use the join method to join each character together into a string. So let's see how we do that. So let's say we have a new variable called Bob, and then we have the name variable. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the join method here, and then we're going to join them together using no spaces, no special characters, which is what this represents. No special characters in between the indexes, and then we're going to join them together. So this is going to now say BOB without any spaces, any special characters in between them. So let's run this and see what we get. Oops, we got to then convert this back to string BOB and run. So now we actually get our hi Bob here. And for those of you who are not familiar with join, let's just, for example, do put a special character between the quotations so we can see how this looks. So what's going to happen is that the B is going to be with a comma, the O is going to be a comma, and that's essentially what it's going to be. It's just going to separate each of them together. Guys, that's all it takes to convert these three data types: string, int, and list. I also will post a blog post in the description of this video if you are curious on how to convert more data types such as decimals and characters into different data types. Feel free to check out that link in the description. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave it in the comment section. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And until next time guys, see you later.